Having been a mixture of different ethnic and racial groups from the beginning, inevitably, the colonies underwent significant changes in all aspects. As the colonists' lives were transformed greatly as the time progressed, so did the religion they preached. Religious British control over America began when individual groups sought for the freedom of their beliefs that differed from the Church of England. From 1607 to 1770s, great religious changes occurred, starting from the first settlements to the end of the colonial period, arguably the American Revolution.
The Church of England allowed the king's subjects to become a public church, which distressed a group of Puritans, the Separatists, who were extreme Puritans who believed in self-discipline and regulation of church through strict laws, which were obviously too much to expect for king's subjects who weren't faithful enough. Thus, Separatists sailed to Plymouth in 1620 in disagreement with the Church of England and established their own settlement.
9 years after Plymouth was established, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was set by Puritans who came to Boston. From 1636 to 1686, Puritans held jurisdiction over Massachusetts government and held a large majority in New England. Only Puritans could vote and have positions in the office. It was a religious Bible community which led to the creation of the Puritan work ethic, which encouraged hard work and worldly pursuits. The Puritans also began the Bible Commonwealth, which admitted members to the church after public interrogation.
A bit more south, in 1633, Maryland was founded by Lord Baltimore with the intentions of establishing a heaven for the persecuted Catholics. It served the Act of Toleration, which tolerated Protestants and all forms of Christianity. A heaven as it may be, Roman Catholics, Lutherans, and Dutch as well as German Reformed bodies would continue to be the small minority. Rhode Island came in 1636, when Roger Williams established free thinking after fleeing from the Bay Colony in search of freedom and religion. Many people who searched for free worship came to Rhode Island, though this colony was scoffed by the colonies around it.
Pennsylvania was founded in 1681 by William Penn, who set it up as a home for persecuted Quakers. However, it tolerated religious freedom for all. By the end of the colonial era, there was no colony with as much religious diversity as there was in Pennsylvania. There resided freedom of worship, although Penn was forced to deny Catholics and Jews certain privileges.
Maryland, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania all sought for the freedom of worship, although Maryland was more direct in the freedom of worship for a specific group. That freedom of worship was long since denied by religious leaders of colonies and was sorely needed, so it can be said that the religion in the colonies was shaped with many fervent groups' efforts to establish heavens to freely preach their religions according to the values that these groups considered important.
However, as time progressed, these values set up by fervent preachers were threatened by more liberal thinkers. Around the mid-17th century, new earnest preachers, known as the Jeremiads, came to be. They refused to convert people, which troubled ministers who eventually created the Halfway Covenant.
Halfway Covenant was created in 1662 by such ministers who desired a new format for church membership inductions. During this period, the Puritan ideology was under the risk of being weakened, as the theory of continuity, which claimed that children of believers were members of the church for perpetual generations, the central theme, had a conflict due to the Puritan idea of maintaining a pure church made up solely of believers. The church baptized people, but the people were not yet considered converted, as the process to being qualified for full church membership was complicated. It made difficult the devotion of the people at the time, until the Puritan churches finally admitted all people, whether or not they were converted. This event signified the deterioration in Puritanism, as the church had to put its ideals behind and compromise with the reality.
In 1692, the Salem witch trials were held when a group of girls claimed that some older women had bewitched them. People immediately began to hunt for these witches, though for reasons other than the fear of them. It ended in 1693 when an accusation was made against the governor's wife and he prohibited any further trials. This weakened the church's authority.
Religion in Virginia was fairly weak, as the people revolved around the plantation society and had a very weak clergy. Anglicans in Virginia were adamant in establishing the Anglican Society and to remove privileges from all else and tried to suppress those who disagreed.
This was changed by one of the greatest religious movements in the colonial era. The Great Awakening took place during the 1730s and 1740s when powerful orators shook sectarian crowds with their magnificent ways of preaching, bringing people back to the faith of religion. Great Awakening revivalists challenged establishment over power and control over direction of church in 1740s in Virginia. They also claimed that preaching did not need to take place in only fixed locations, in other words, churches. Most notable was George Whitefield, who shook entranced audiences, preaching that humans were helpless and God was all-knowing and omnipotent. Jonathan Edwards, a revivalist, claimed that hard work was not enough, but absolute dependence on God was needed.
Some Anglicans were converted by these dissenters, great concern for the other Anglicans, but by 1760 they outnumbered the Anglicans and disagreed with the requirements to preach at fixed locations. The Anglicans persecuted and jailed those who disagreed with them, but their actions could not suppress the expansion of sectarian religion in Virginia. Yet there are some aspects that didn't change. For instance, in 1759, Reverend Jonathan Matthew denounced Catholics as blind and furious zealots who were trying to butcher Protestants. This signified the fact that colonists viewed Catholics negatively.
However, a great change is still exemplified. From an extremely religious body that controlled the government and unquestioned authority, the colonies became a body that challenged the church's authority and clergy's abilities.